The veteran had always been a quiet man who moved through life without making noise. People in the town often saw him walking to the small park near the community center every morning. He never talked much, but those who knew him knew he had served his country for many years. He carried himself with calm dignity, the kind of peace that comes from someone who had already faced the hardest moments life could offer. One afternoon, he walked toward the community center as usual, planning to sit on the bench near the old oak tree. He liked watching the children play, the teenagers practicing basketball, and the elders chatting under the shade. It made him feel connected. Even though he lived alone, he never felt lonely in those moments. That day, however, something unexpected happened. A group of young locals stood outside the building, laughing among themselves. They were loud, restless, and full of the kind of energy that often made older folks shake their heads. They weren't bad kids, but they acted without thinking sometimes, doing things just to make their friends laugh. The veteran approached slowly, minding his own business, not wanting to disturb anyone. He had taken just a few steps past the group when one of the boys made a remark loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't hateful, but it was disrespectful in a way that made the others laugh harder. The veteran didn't react. He simply kept walking. He didn't believe in responding to every rude comment life threw at him. He had learned long ago that silence was often stronger than words, but the reaction from the group only made them bolder. One of the boys stepped in front of him, blocking his path just to show off. Another boy pulled out his phone, already recording, thinking something funny might happen. The veteran stopped and tried to move aside, but the boy moved with him like he was playing a game. The veteran's patience held strong. He quietly asked to pass, but his voice was so soft that only the boy closest to him heard it. Instead of letting him go, the boy smirked and gave him a small shove on the shoulder. No one expected the shove to be strong. It wasn't meant to be, but the veteran had old injuries he never talked about. His balance wasn't as steady as it once was. When the boy pushed him, even lightly, his feet slipped on the uneven pavement. His body twisted, and he fell hard onto the ground, landing on his arm and hip. The laughter stopped immediately. Some of the kids gasped, unsure what to do. The boy who pushed him froze, suddenly realizing how far things had gone. The veteran didn't scream. He didn't shout. He simply stayed on the ground for a few moments, breathing slowly, trying to gather himself. A few people nearby rushed forward to help, while others just stared. Someone called an ambulance, and within minutes the paramedics arrived. They lifted the veteran carefully and checked his injuries. He winced from the pain but didn't complain. His calmness confused the boys who had been laughing earlier. A couple of them backed away, embarrassed and frightened. The one who had pushed him tried to speak, but couldn't find the right words. As the paramedics loaded the veteran into the ambulance, a small crowd had already gathered. Some people had seen parts of the incident, and others had seen the phone recording. And by the time the ambulance pulled away, the video had already started spreading online. Within hours, nearly everyone in the town had seen it. The sight of the veteran falling, the phone pointed at him. The nervous laughter, all of it stirred anger in people's hearts. The veteran was taken to the hospital for tests. Luckily, nothing was broken, but the doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation. He lay in the hospital bed quietly, listening to the sounds of machines and footsteps in the hallway. When the nurse asked him what had happened, he didn't go into details. He didn't want to cause trouble for the boys. He simply said he had fallen, leaving out the rest. Meanwhile, the town was boiling with frustration. People who had known the veteran for years were furious. They talked openly about how someone so gentle could be treated with such disrespect. Soon, the police department received dozens of calls asking for action. Community elders, shop owners, teachers, many felt that something needed to be done. The local authorities began investigating the incident. It didn't take long to identify the boy who had pushed the veteran. His face was clear in the video, and people recognized him immediately. He wasn't a stranger. He was from a well-known family, one with influence and connections. Some people whispered that the case would probably disappear quietly, just like other incidents involving privileged families sometimes did. But this time, things were different. The community refused to let it go. The video kept circulating, gaining more views every hour. Comments poured in, most expressing anger, disappointment, or disbelief. Even those who didn't personally know the veteran felt something stir inside them. No one liked seeing someone who had served the country be humiliated in such a careless way. The police finally visited the boy's home. His parents were shocked and embarrassed. They hadn't known anything about what happened until the officers showed them the video. The boy sat quietly, not making excuses. He hadn't expected such a strong reaction from the town. What he thought was a silly moment for his friends had turned into something much bigger. The officers asked him to come in for questioning the next day. By then, word had spread that the case might go to court. This made people even more nervous. Some believed justice would be served. Others thought the boy's family influence would soften the outcome. But no one could deny that the community wanted to see fairness this time. Back at the hospital, the veteran woke up to find a few concerned residents sitting by his bedside. One of them was an older neighbor who always checked in on him, especially when something didn't feel right. They told him how the town had reacted. He looked surprised, almost confused. He didn't understand why people were so upset. To him, the incident wasn't worth so much attention. He insisted again that he didn't want any trouble, but the community had already decided it was their trouble. They saw it as a matter of respect that the veteran had earned long before most of the townspeople were even born. Later that evening, a representative from the local authorities visited him. They assured him that the incident would be handled fairly. The veteran remained calm, thanking them but asking them not to escalate things unnecessarily. The officer smiled kindly, knowing they had to follow through regardless of his quiet wishes. The next morning, the town buzzed with updates. News spread that the boy would be appearing in front of a judge soon. People debated endlessly, some saying he should be punished, others insisting he needed guidance, not punishment. Most people simply wanted an outcome that reflected respect for the veteran. The veteran, meanwhile, returned home after being discharged. He walked slowly, still feeling the soreness in his side, but his spirit remained steady. He tried to continue his routine, yet everywhere he went, people approached him with concern, offering help, promising support. He appreciated the kindness, but wished the attention would fade. But the attention only grew. The story had become something much larger than the fall itself. It became a conversation about how society treated those who had served, how young people behaved, how justice worked in small towns, and how respect was sometimes forgotten until moments like this reminded everyone of its value. In quiet moments inside his small home, the veteran wondered what the judge would decide. He didn't want anger. He didn't want to see anyone punished harshly. Yet he couldn't deny that something inside him hoped the situation might lead the young boy toward better choices. Maybe this moment could teach him something important, something the veteran had learned long ago through much harder lessons. As the court date approached, tension filled the town. No one knew what would happen next. But everyone knew one thing clearly: the judge's upcoming decision would be remembered, whether good or bad. And the veteran, sitting quietly in his living room with the afternoon light streaming through the window, felt the weight of the moment without saying a word. He had been wronged, yes, but he also believed that every wrong carried a chance for something good to grow if handled with fairness. The entire town waited, and the story was only just beginning. The morning of the hearing arrived quietly, but the town was anything but quiet. People were already awake early, talking about the case over breakfast, in shops, at bus stops, and outside offices. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and everyone felt connected to the situation in some way. It wasn't just about a fall anymore. It was about respect, justice, and what kind of values the community wanted to uphold. The courthouse stood at the center of town, an old brick building that had seen many cases over the years, but rarely had it seen a crowd like the one gathering outside that day. People of all ages began lining up long before the doors even opened. Some came out of support for the veteran, others came out of curiosity, and a few showed up simply because the entire town was talking about it, and they didn't want to feel left out. Inside the courthouse, staff members were preparing the courtroom. They placed chairs neatly, checked microphones, and set up documents on the judge's bench. Everything had to be in order. They knew today's hearing would be watched closely. Even local reporters stood ready with notepads and cameras, careful not to cross any rules but determined to capture the moment. The veteran arrived quietly, just as he always did. A neighbor drove him because he still felt a little sore from the fall. When he stepped out of the car, several people standing nearby nodded respectfully at him. Some smiled gently, some offered encouraging words, and some simply looked at him with appreciation. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, and it made him feel a little uncomfortable. But he responded with polite nods. He walked slowly toward the entrance, leaning slightly on the railing beside the stairs. Two older men who had also served many years ago walked with him, not saying much, but offering silent support. The veteran didn't ask for it. They simply wanted to be there. Inside the courthouse, the air felt thick with expectation. Everyone knew they had to remain calm and respectful, but the tension couldn't be ignored. People whispered in low voices, leaning closer to share their thoughts. Some wondered if the boy's family had hired special lawyers. Others wondered if the judge would treat the case differently because of the public pressure. The boy who had pushed the veteran walked in through a side door with his parents. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His parents looked tense and worried. They had spent the last few days hearing non-stop phone calls, messages, and comments from people they knew. Some supported them, some criticized them, and some simply wanted answers. The boy knew he had made a mistake, one he couldn't take back, and it was weighing heavily on him. He took his place with his family, sitting stiffly. His parents whispered small reassurances, but he didn't respond much. His mind was swirling with everything that had happened since that day outside the community center. The laughter, the fall, the video, the comments online, every part of it replayed in his head. Like an uncomfortable loop, the veteran sat on the opposite side of the room. Not too far away, but far enough that the two didn't meet eyes right away. He didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful, almost concerned. The people sitting near him felt the softness in his expression and admired him even more. Despite everything, he didn't hold bitterness. When the judge finally entered the courtroom, everyone stood. He was a calm-looking man with a thoughtful face, known throughout the town for being fair. He didn't rush decisions and he didn't let outside pressure influence him. Today, though, even he could feel how much the room was holding its breath. Everyone took their seats. The judge looked around the courtroom slowly, noticing the crowded benches, the serious faces, the nervous eyes of the boy, and the composed stillness of the veteran. He adjusted his glasses and opened the case file before him. The hearing began with the usual formalities. But the room remained unusually silent. It was as if everyone feared even a whisper might interrupt the flow of justice. The lawyers presented the basic facts. The video evidence was mentioned. The fall, the shove, the reaction of the crowd, all of it was laid out clearly. The judge listened without interrupting, giving each speaker enough time to express their points. The boy's lawyer tried to explain that the shove wasn't meant to cause harm, that it had been a foolish moment, not an intentional act. He emphasized that the boy regretted his actions deeply, and had already taken responsibility by cooperating fully. Some people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably at his words. They weren't sure if this was genuine or just a rehearsed line. Then the prosecutor talked about the importance of setting an example, especially because the victim was not just any citizen but someone who had served the country with honor. He spoke calmly, without exaggeration, but with firm clarity. He said that the town watched everything that unfolded, and the outcome of this case would send a message about what the community valued. The courtroom remained focused as each side presented their views, but the moment everyone was waiting for, perhaps the most powerful part, came, when the judge invited the veteran to speak if he wished. The veteran stood slowly. He didn't look like someone who wanted revenge or harsh punishment. His voice was gentle, steady, and surprisingly quiet in the large room. He said he didn't wish any harm on the boy. He said he understood that young people sometimes acted without thinking, and that he had seen far worse things in his life. All he wanted, he said, was to see learning and growth come from the situation. His words carried more weight than anyone expected. Even the judge paused after he finished, as if letting the meaning settle into the walls of the courtroom. The boy's eyes filled with emotion as he listened. It wasn't the guilt that hit him the hardest, it was the kindness. He had expected anger, but the veteran's calm voice felt like a mirror showing him the size of his mistake in a way no punishment could. After the veteran sat down, the judge leaned back in his chair and thought quietly for a moment. It was clear he was considering every detail, every voice, every emotion in the room. No one dared to whisper now. It felt like time had stopped. The judge began speaking carefully. He talked about respect, responsibility, and the importance of understanding the consequences of one's actions. He mentioned how a moment of carelessness could hurt someone deeply, not just physically but emotionally. He also acknowledged the veteran's generosity and wisdom in his words. Then the judge addressed the boy, directly, not with anger but with seriousness. He explained that age or carelessness didn't erase responsibility. The boy had acted in a way that caused harm, and the community needed to see accountability. At the same time, the judge spoke about the power of second chances. He said that sometimes, the right kind of consequence could change a person for the better more than a harsh punishment ever could. People leaned forward slightly, trying to guess what would come next. The judge then explained that he wasn't going to choose a typical punishment. He believed this was an opportunity not just for the boy, but for the whole town to witness something constructive. Instead of jail time or heavy fines, he said he was considering a form of service that would require the boy to work directly with veterans in the community. A quiet murmur filled the room. Some eyebrows raised. Some people nodded thoughtfully. No one expected this direction. The judge continued, saying that real understanding came from connection. If the boy spent time helping those who had served, listening to their stories, understanding their struggles, maybe he would grow in ways he wouldn't inside a cell. He also required a formal apology, counseling sessions, and regular check-ins to ensure the boy took the responsibility seriously. The boy listened with wide, stunned eyes. He had prepared himself for something else entirely. His parents looked relieved but also deeply reflective. People in the audience exchanged glances of surprise. The veteran sat still, absorbing everything. The decision was unexpected, but it wasn't unreasonable. He saw hope in it. Who saw hope in it? Hope for change. The judge closed his folder gently and reminded everyone that respect wasn't something that could be demanded. It had to be understood, practiced, and lived. And this was one way to encourage that understanding. As the hearing came to an end, the courtroom slowly began to empty. People left in small groups, whispering about the judge's choice. Some said it was wise. Some said it was too gentle. But no one denied that it was surprising. The boy stood quietly with his parents, grappling with the reality of the path ahead. It wasn't an easy one. It wasn't meant to be. But maybe, in time, it would lead him somewhere better. The veteran walked out with the same calm steps he always had. People greeted him with soft smiles, offering to walk with him or drive him home. He politely refused most of the offers, wanting to walk a little on his own. The town had shown him respect today, and that was enough. Outside the courthouse, a soft breeze moved through the trees, as if the town itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The story wasn't over, not even close. But for now, something important had shifted. Something meaningful had begun. The days after the hearing felt different for the whole town. People couldn't stop talking about the judge's decision. Some were surprised, some impressed, and some confused. They had expected a strict punishment or maybe a light warning. But the judge chose something in the middle, something that made people think more deeply rather than simply cheer or complain. It wasn't the usual outcome. And that alone made it the center of every conversation. In the small grocery store near the town square, customers stood in the aisles discussing the hearing as they picked vegetables. A group of older men sat outside the cafe, debating whether the judge's decision was too soft or just right. Teenagers at the bus stop whispered that the boy got lucky, while others wondered what it would feel like to work with veterans every week. The community wasn't used to such an unusual punishment, and it made them curious. The boy, however, wasn't thinking about what people were saying. His mind was filled with a heavy mix of guilt, fear, confusion, and uncertainty. After leaving the courthouse, he went home with his parents, but the house didn't feel the same. He could sense the disappointment in the air, even when no one was speaking. His parents tried to stay calm for him, but they were clearly troubled by everything that had happened. He sat in his room that evening, staring at the wall, replaying the judge's words again and again. He realized that the judge didn't treat him like a criminal, but neither did he let him escape responsibility. It was a strange kind of balance that made the boy feel even more aware of the consequences. Working with veterans wasn't something he had ever imagined. He didn't know how he would fit into that world or what they would think of him. The veteran, on the other hand, tried to return to his quiet routine, but life around him didn't return to normal, so strangers greeted him more warmly than before. People checked on him more often. Even small acts of kindness, like someone holding a door open or offering him a seat, became more frequent. While he appreciated the concern, he wanted things to feel ordinary again. Still, he couldn't deny that something was happening in the town, something that brought people closer together. The incident had reminded everyone that kindness mattered and that respect wasn't an old-fashioned idea. It was something that needed to be practiced. A few days later, the boy received a letter explaining the schedule for his community service. He would need to report to the local Veterans Center 3 times a week. The letter listed tasks he would be expected to help with: organizing supplies, cleaning outdoor areas, assisting with events, and spending time with veterans who needed help with simple daily activities. He would also have to attend counseling sessions on responsibility and behavior. His hands trembled slightly as he read the letter. He wasn't afraid of the work, but he was afraid of the people he had to face. He wondered if the veterans would hate him or reject him. He worried that they would see him only as the boy who had pushed one of their own to the ground. The first day he arrived at the Veterans Center, he walked in with slow steps. The building had a warm, welcoming feeling, but his nervousness made everything feel heavy. The person in charge of volunteer scheduling greeted him politely and went over the rules. She spoke calmly, not treating him differently because of his situation. That helped him breathe a little easier. She introduced him to a few veterans who were sitting in the main room playing a board game. They looked at him with curiosity, not hostility. One man nodded at him and said hello. Another gave a small smile. The boy felt a wave of relief, though he still kept his eyes low. His first tasks were simple stacking boxes, organizing donated items, sweeping the outdoor walkway. He worked quietly, focusing on doing everything carefully. The veterans watched him from time to time, but they didn't say much. He didn't expect them to. Before leaving, he was asked to attend a short orientation session about the lives of veterans. A staff member explained the challenges many of them face: health issues, loneliness, difficulties adjusting to civilian life, and memories they didn't always share easily. The boy listened closely, absorbing each word with growing respect. By the time he stepped out of the building, his heart felt heavier but clearer. Meanwhile, back in town, people were paying attention to how the service might change him. Some believed he would learn from it, others doubted he'd take it seriously. But the veteran himself stayed neutral, not wanting to judge a young person too quickly. He had seen enough in life to know people could grow in unexpected ways. That as the days turned into weeks, the boy continued working at the center. Slowly, something started to change, not in a dramatic or sudden way, but in small moments. One afternoon, while helping organize books in a small library area, a veteran sitting nearby began telling him about a memory from his early service days. The boy didn't know why the man chose to talk to him, but he listened quietly. The story wasn't about battle or hardship. It was about friendship, trust, and a time when a small mistake nearly caused something serious. The man laughed gently at the memory, and the boy found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. Another day, he helped a veteran who struggled to walk without a cane. The man thanked him with genuine warmth, and the boy realized that simple acts of kindness mattered more than he had understood. For the first time, he felt himself wanting to help, not because he had to, but because it felt right. The staff at the center began noticing the difference. His posture grew straighter, his movements became more confident. He no longer rushed through tasks. He took his time, learned routines, and paid attention to those around him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were gentle and thoughtful. The news of his progress slowly spread around town. Some people were surprised, some were proud, others were relieved that the judge's decision seemed to be working. The boy didn't know about these conversations, but even if he had, he wouldn't have cared. He was too focused on learning and improving. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. The veteran he had pushed came to the center for a routine appointment. When the boy saw him from across the room, his body tensed. He didn't know whether to approach him or stay back. The veteran noticed him too. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and the boy felt a rush of guilt return. The veteran walked slowly toward him. The boy felt his heart pounding. He wanted to apologize again, but the words tangled in his throat. Before he could say anything, the veteran spoke in his calm, steady voice. He said he had heard about the boy's progress and appreciated the effort he was putting in. He said that growth didn't happen overnight, but it was clear the boy was trying. Those few words, simple and sincere, lifted a weight from the boy's shoulders that he had been carrying since the incident. The veteran then placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said he hoped the experience would guide him in life. There was no anger in his tone, no resentment, just quiet encouragement. The boy felt his eyes grow warm, but he blinked quickly, not wanting to show too much emotion publicly. After the veteran left, the boy sat in a quiet corner for a few minutes, reflecting on everything. It was the first time since the incident that he felt a sense of real forgiveness. He knew he still had much to learn, but he also knew he was changing. As the day ended, he walked home with a clearer mind. The sunset stretched across the sky in soft colors, and for the first time in a long while, he felt that life might move forward in a better direction. The town, too, felt the shift. The judge's unusual decision was proving to be something more than a punishment. It was becoming a lesson for everyone about compassion, responsibility, and the possibility of growth. And though no one knew exactly how the story would end, they could feel that something meaningful was beginning to unfold. The first few days of his punishment were exactly what the young man had feared. He woke up early every morning, dragged himself to the community center, and sat quietly in the corner while the veterans gathered for their daily activities. He watched them talk, laugh, and support each other like a family. But he didn't join them. He kept his distance, arms crossed, eyes down, acting like he didn't care. Anyone looking at him could tell he felt embarrassed and annoyed. He believed the judge had been too harsh, and he didn't see why he needed to spend time with people he had barely met before. When the coordinator asked him to help set up chairs, he did it slowly. When someone asked him to pass supplies, he did it without saying a word. He didn't smile, didn't greet anyone, and avoided eye contact. To him, this was just a task he had to complete so he could get back to his normal life. He didn't think he had anything in common with any of the people there, and he certainly didn't believe he belonged in a place where everyone carried stories. He didn't fully understand, but people around him didn't treat him like a troublemaker. The veterans didn't bring up what he had done. They didn't point fingers or whisper behind his back. Instead, they welcomed him with gentle nods and patient smiles. Even the veteran he had hurt months earlier didn't avoid him. He simply carried on with his routine, as if waiting for time to do its work. Slowly, without even meaning to, the young man started noticing small things. He noticed how one of the older veterans struggled to lift boxes but still tried to help others. He noticed how another veteran carried a small notebook everywhere, writing down reminders because he sometimes forgot things easily. He noticed that some of them hid their pain behind jokes, and others stayed quiet, staring at the wall with tired eyes. One afternoon, while he was cleaning the outdoor area, he saw a veteran sitting alone on a bench. The man looked lost in thought, staring at the ground. For a moment the young man felt a strange pull in his chest. He wasn't sure why, but he walked over and offered the man a bottle of water. It wasn't much, just a simple gesture. But the veteran looked up and smiled softly, as if that small act meant more than the young man expected. "Thanks," the man said, taking the bottle. "People forget we also get tired." The young man nodded awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess everyone does," he replied. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was the first time he had spoken to anyone there without being asked to. Later that week, the coordinator told him he would be helping with a small event where veterans shared their stories. At first, he felt uncomfortable. Listening to people talk about their lives wasn't something he usually enjoyed. He preferred keeping everything short and simple, but duty was duty, so he sat in the back and kept quiet. The room grew silent as each veteran stepped forward. They didn't talk about battles or victories. They talked about friendship, loss, homesickness, and the difficult days that came after they returned to normal life. One man shared how he was trying to rebuild his confidence after years of struggling to find stable work. Another spoke about adjusting to life without the friends he once trained with. A woman talked about raising children while trying to balance her own emotional challenges. The young man listened at first because he had to, but soon he found himself paying attention because he wanted to. Their stories weren't loud or dramatic. They were honest, humble, and so deeply human that he felt something shift inside him. These weren't people looking for pity. They were people trying hard every day to stay strong, even when no one noticed. And somewhere in the middle of those stories, the young man started thinking about his own behavior. He remembered the moment he had hurt the veteran. He remembered how angry he had been that day, acting tough when deep down he had been frustrated with himself. Hearing their experiences made his own actions feel small or wrong, but also something he could still fix. It was the first time he felt real regret, not because he was forced to, but because he genuinely wished he had made better choices. The next day, something unusual happened. Instead of sitting alone during lunch break, he walked up to the group of veterans and asked if he could join them. They made space for him without hesitation. He ate quietly at first, but soon he found himself laughing at their stories, listening closely when someone spoke, and asking questions he never thought he'd care about. The veteran he had hurt was sitting there too. The young man looked at him carefully, waiting for a sign of anger or discomfort, but the veteran simply nodded and gave a soft smile like someone who believed people could change if given the chance. As days turned into weeks, the young man's behavior changed more and more. He wasn't told to carry boxes anymore, he volunteered. He wasn't told to help with paperwork, he offered. He began remembering people's names, asking how their day was going, and checking on those who seemed tired. The veterans noticed the change, and they appreciated it more than he realized. Then came the day of his public apology. It was meant to be a simple event, just a formal statement so the community could see he had taken responsibility. But what happened surprised everyone when he stood at the front of the room, holding the microphone. He took a deep breath. At first he stuck to the script he had prepared. But as he looked around, he saw familiar faces. The veteran who struggled with lifting boxes, the one who carried the notebook, the woman who balanced her family and her challenges, and of course, the man he had hurt. His voice trembled slightly as he continued. Then he put the paper aside and spoke from the heart. He apologized not just for his actions, but for his attitude, for the disrespect, for not understanding what many people in the room carried with them every day. He spoke about the lessons he had learned. Not just about responsibility, but about empathy, patience, and kindness. He talked about how meeting the veterans had changed his view of the world and how he wanted to do better from that day forward. People in the room wiped their eyes quietly. They had expected a rehearsed speech. They hadn't expected honesty. Finally, he turned toward the veteran he had hurt. His voice softened. "I am truly sorry," he said. "Not because I have to say it, but because I mean it. Thank you for giving me the space to grow." The veteran stood slowly. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then he walked toward the young man and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I forgive you," he said simply. No dramatic scenes, no loud applause. Just a human moment filled with understanding. Word of the event spread through the town. People were amazed at how much the young man had changed. Even those who had doubted the judge's decision at first began to praise it. They saw how a punishment based on connection, learning, and community had created a transformation that traditional consequences never could have achieved. The young man didn't stop after completing his required hours. He continued showing up at the center, helping with events, fundraising, and spreading awareness about the needs of He even talked to young people in nearby schools, encouraging them to think before acting and to respect those who had lived through challenges they couldn't imagine. What had once been a moment of disrespect became a story. Everyone remembered not because of the mistake, but because of the change that followed. The judge's decision was celebrated as wise, compassionate, and deeply effective. The community grew more united, and many people started volunteering as well, inspired by the young man's transformation. In the end, the story became a quiet reminder that people can grow when they are guided with patience, understanding, and the chance to make things right. It showed that healing is possible, that forgiveness is powerful, and that even one person's change can inspire a whole town to be better.